The ethnic cleavages that characterize the Nigerian Union have had to absorb the shocks and also aftershocks of decades-long political friction, going all the way back to the 1914 amalgamation and christening of the country by the British. And in the view of many analysts, there has also been a worrying lack of will to seek for honest answers from within. However, in recent years, successive Nigerian governments have been making some effort to address the perceived constitutional imbalances holding Nigeria back from attaining meaningful statehood. Now, in pursuit of this, the Southern and Middle Belt Elders Forum, an amalgam of forces working to present a common front in its engagements with the politically dominant North, have offered to liaise with the Senate. So we're now going to be looking at the practicability and also even wisdom of this offer by talking to Dr. Sam Amadi, a lawyer and also the former chairman of the Nigeria Electricity Regulatory Commission. Dr. Amadi was also a fellow at the Care Center for Human Rights Policy at Harvard University's Kennedy School of Government. Welcome to the program. Good morning.
Good morning, Sam Amadi.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
Yes, well, let's spend a few minutes taking a look at the proposed constitutional amendment process. On February 12, the National Assembly set up a 56-man review Constitution Amendment Committee led by the Deputy Senate President, Senator Ovieomo Agege. And now the Deputy Senate President wants input from stakeholders in Nigeria, and some of the issues, quite a long list of issues. But in your view, what should be the main priorities? There are persons who are talking about Land Use Act being expunged from the Constitution, need for a review of devolution of powers, a review of the exclusive and the concurrent list, you know, the Office of the Attorney General being redefined, local government fiscal autonomy, and so on and so forth. I mean, you are a lawyer, so you know what the issues are. But, you know, instead of a wholesale constitution review, if we were to prioritize, what are those key issues that you would recommend as necessary primary areas of focus for now?
Okay, thank you very much. I think let me start by saying that it's actually counterintuitive, but we shouldn't be changing constitution too frequent. I mean, the science is clear. Most stable societies, democracies have constitutions that endure. There's a correlation between too much amendment of constitution and political instability. And why is this so? The political theory is simple. A constitution is an anti-majoritarian framework. That means that constitutions ensure that no matter the coalition that comes to power, certain basic processes and issues are secured. So when you now subject the constitution to too many amendments, it means that it's now part of a political negotiation. So it undermines the stability of the constitution itself and affects governance. So I err on the part of less amendment, not frequent, once in a while, like the American Constitution, a few amendments, French, the British, most of the Scandinavians. Now, back to Nigeria. This is routine. Every Senate always conducts a constitutional amendment. And the problem is that the amendments lead to worse constitution, actually, and worse governance. You look at the detailing. We encounter a problem in the judiciary, maybe the Imo case at the Supreme Court or the Zamfara Supreme Court will result into another constitutional insertion somewhere, and then that creates a problem because we don't theorize it properly, we don't look at it properly. Then in the future we are trapped again. Then we go back and remove that one. It's messy. So what should we do? Well, since the National Assembly likes to do constitutional amendment, the question is, should you do? Is Nigeria now ripe for a constitutional conference, which means we sit back and renegotiate the fundamentals? People are talking about regionalism. People are talking about several things that kind of hark back to loss of confidence, issues of justice and equity. But if we're going to do piecemeal, I think three things for me are important. One, let's first downsize our constitution, remove all these things, whether it's Land Use Act, elections, just throw them out of the Constitution. These things are things that, by their dynamism, they are subject to renegotiation. They are subject to transactional dealing over time. For example, elections. You have to allow the electoral body, by simple lawmaking process, to change rules, even by administrative rulemaking processes, to change rules to meet the dynamics and the problems and crises they observe from try and error, the learning curve. Why should it be a constitutional issue? So many things the constitution should be removed. Some of the descriptions around, for example, policing. You just have to set up a framework for policing and allow the detailing of police processes, community policing. Now we're going to go to constitution. So the first job is to clean the constitution, remove things to basics, just the basic things that guarantee what I call the anti-majoritarian provisions. For example, fundamental rights. It's now time for us to think about constitutionalizing socio-economic rights like the South Africans did. Should we go that way? Those are issues to discuss because we want to create a society where policy making in response to the challenges of welfare. The second issue I think we should deal with are issues around allocation of revenue and resources. Are we going to have? Do we want to go back to much more federal structure where states have the capacity and the right to own resources, to create productive engagement and own those resources? For example, you take out the federal government for some of the economic activities that creates both democratization and development in the states and the region. So I think that's one other area. The federal government should pull back, allow the states more effectiveness and space for governance, for economic development. The other issues, so issues around revenue allocation, issues around the economic functions of the states as federative units. Another issue I think is critical is a constitutionalization of citizenship in a much more robust manner. We've been dealing with indigenous citizens crisis across the country. It fits into the idea about conflicts, farmer headers, or whatever I call it. Now, that's critical. We need to go back to section 25 to 28 that talks about citizenship. In my view, we focus so much on ethnic origin of citizenship. So we have to look at that again. How do we define citizenship in a modern economy where people carry multiple identities, and what then should you use to flag the sense of citizenship? That's critical. If you look all over the world, especially in Africa, most of the conflicts are arisen around citizenship contestation. We see that across, even in India now, that's going through a crisis of how do they define the India state. Should it be a state that's Hindi, or should it be a state that is multi-ethnic? And the current government says, well, we have Pakistan for the Muslims, India should be a Hindi state. That's where we have to look at that. Again, critical, perhaps more critical, is a place of state and religion in that constitution. We committed what I call the original sin in 1959 Constitutional Conference, and we'll keep repeating it. We should be bold now to excise religion out of the Constitution. We should reinforce the statement in Section 10. Section 10, the incoherence in our Constitution, Section 10 says we are going to be a secular state, at least to that language. Section 38 says we're going to have freedom of religion. And other constitutions now start talking about Sharia laws, start talking about courts to address religious issues. No. It's a destabilizing factor. We should create a constitutional harmony, coherence. We're a secular democratic state, not a feudal religious theocratic state. I think these are the big things to look at. And so it creates a simple, coherent constitution that addresses the fundamental of who are we, conceptualization. Well, who are Nigerians? What's the focus of the Nigerian state? A state focused on enterprise, focused on freedom, equity, and then how is the basic allocation of power across the various levels and across the various geopolitical levels. If you want to go to federal level, that's true federalism between state and region, or federal region, federal state. Then leave the rest of these stories around elections and around Land Use Act. Leave it for political bargaining as time arises through normal lawmaking and administrative rule-based processes. Don't make your constitution answer to all your immediate challenges, and then it becomes a totally useless constitution. And the frequent amendment to accommodate clear stupidity of the past means that you are creating a destabilizing constitution, and of course you are destabilizing your polity. Great democracies rest on constitutions that have durability because they have strategically negotiated the basis of statehood and then put an anti-majoritarian seal on it and then discuss and deal on other non-important issues. I think we should go more for downsizing the constitution, focus on those three issues of conflict: citizenship, religion, and the relationship between state and the federal government in terms of economic production, in terms of ownership, and in terms of addressing their own domestic state crisis. That's the two areas to go. The rest should be politically negotiated and not put into the constitution. Elections should go out. That's a basic framework for election. Let everything be done. Yeah.
Certainly, and I'd like to take you up on the point that you mentioned about citizenship and multiple ethnicities, because I believe that this is an area that has to be addressed if we really want to talk about constitutional review. Can we really go anywhere without overcoming this particular barrier that we're facing? And how do we go about changing this? For example, in Rwanda, after the genocide, it became illegal to refer to yourself as Hutu or Tutsi. Here we are in Nigeria, where we had the Biafran War 50 years ago, and that is still one of the least documented wars in the world, regardless of how deep-rooted it was in ethnicity. So where does that conversation start? How do we approach that? Can we even look at constitutional review without citizenship even being the starting point?
Absolutely right. And the point is, see, we have to make a choice. That's why constitutional framework is a political choice of who you want to be. First, if we're going to be the so-called Federal Republic of Nigeria, a country that's not ethnically defined, then our citizenship should not have, for example, it talks about a Nigerian whose parents were born who are ethnic groups indigenous to Nigeria. So it creates a problem, and that's why we have to do with our borders. People are alleging all kinds of things. Oh, people are coming from Mali, people are coming from Chad, because essentially the definition is a slippery slope. Ethnic groups indigenous to Nigeria. Now, we have to clean that out. We have to define, everybody who says Nigeria is a Nigerian now, but going forward, this is what it means to be a Nigerian. You are either born in Nigeria by parents who are Nigerians, or you have naturalized. We should make it simple. We should create a secular state. What that means that it's not a state that does not know that there are ethnic groups, but a state that presumes or proposes that everybody will be viewed first and foremost and lastly as a citizen. And therefore, we will ban references to ethnic origins in public documentation. So the state sees you as a Nigerian. And then states in Nigeria should take their cue and propose you as a citizen of their state based on intelligible secular propositions, like, for example, how long have you stayed, your tax, whether you're paying tax, and other known ethnically defined, identities and criteria. Now, if you do that, so that's what it really means. We are creating a Nigerian citizenship. We need to de-emphasize ethnicity. Now, if we don't want to go that route, the sensible route to go then is a route of regionally, some kind of confederacy. Because it cannot be talking about Nigerians robustly being Yorubas, Igbos, Fulanis, in public space, and being a Nigerian.
Sorry to interrupt you. We need to take a short commercial break, but we'll be right back. Please stay with us. Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Still with us in our Abuja studio is Dr. Sam Amadi, a lawyer and former chairman of the Nigeria Electricity Regulatory Commission, who has been helping us to analyze the plan by the Ninth National Assembly to further amend the Nigerian Constitution. Now, Dr. Amadi, you were talking about ethnicity. And I would like you, to focus on that a little bit more. For one reason, every time we are about to try and attempt a review of the Constitution in Nigeria, ethnicity had always been a problem in terms of the attitude of the stakeholders. At the moment, we're told that the National Assembly, even without the amendment process, having started at all, are already divided on key issues like devolution of powers, independence, candidacy, Land Use Act, diaspora voting, proposal to remove state independent electoral commissions from the Constitution. And you even have Southern and Middle Belt elders or leaders forum coming together. And then Northern groups also saying this is our position. Would we ever be able to come up with a constitution that will serve national interest, the interest of the citizen? If we continue to have this kind of ethnic cleavages that are so difficult, divisive, it derailed the 2005 political conference, constitutional conference. It also affected how the 2014 national conference was organized and was treated subsequently. How do we deal with this challenge, if you have any solution at all?
Well, I think that's the trap. Like I said, the idea is that when you do a constitution at the first time, get it right. Because the conditions necessary for that convocation of ethnic or religious or different people together and agree on a constitution like we had means that they negotiated over time, and now they have started operating the constitution, and people are taking benefits. Now, when you look at the electoral process creates minorities and majorities. So in the National Assembly today, some geopolitical zone has the majority. And these amendments will have cost-benefit analysis go to it. They're going to lose something. For example, if you say diaspora voting, people are going to look at who are more in diaspora, who have people who are more politically smart in diaspora. How would that dilute votes? Even the U.S. Gerrymandering happens, and some votes, diaspora votes also can constitute, a winning, can become a game changer in some close elections. So the basic thing is that you are seeing the natural political process playing out now. And that's what is going to hold us down. So we end up in this exercise doing very minor, insignificant, and alternate and surprisingly or ironically destabilizing amendments. It creates the impression that you can just wake up any morning and amend the constitution. And by the way, we end up with nothing. And then in the 10th Senate or 10th National Assembly, we start back again with all the funding, all the allowances, all the distractions, all the failures and silliness. And then we end up worst case. So what do we do? I think two things are critical here. The Nigerian crisis has come to a point where there should be something more than mere legislative constitutional amendment. It's time now to start more like a convocation. Let Nigerians start really discussing among themselves. Now, if you don't like that constitutional conference, people like, or the report of the 2014, people say, oh, we didn't implement it. But I think it's actually better now to have a constitutional conference of whatever way, where Nigerians come back to the drawing board and set up a framework that can work and that no longer going to be part of a political ping pong. You can't amend it anyhow. We don't go back to amending things. A small document that articulates a vision of justice, equity, and reinvest social trust in the Nigerian project. Now, if you don't want to go that route, which people are afraid of because it will basically deconstruct Nigeria and reconstruct Nigeria again. The other way out is the way of administrative reform. That means forget constitutional amendment, let some actors operate unconstitutional. Some states start doing investments, they disregard the constitutional limitations, the constitution becomes dead. And so the confidence of politics, the strategies, the ability of people to maneuver their way through the processes, you now create a governance without a constitution, because this constitution is no longer viable. And so if those who have the majority who have the political coalition strong enough to trump every move, block a real change, then they will unleash also the unconstitutional behavior of people acting contrary to constitution. And, for example, Amoteku today, if we went ahead as a zonal police force, is illegal, arguable, because there's no Western Nigeria as a legal entity that has lawmaking power. But it's inevitable. It becomes, what we say, governing outside the constitution, because people have to really live in a manner that sustains and survive. So I think there's a choice between Nigerians today, whether to really allow reach to reform that restore Nigeria to a path where we become a real secular democratic state that has chances of both stability, survival, and development, or we get to a place where we become like ungoverned territory, where people now, de facto mode of a state of nature, people now govern themselves without reference to the constitution. One will happen. So I think my plea to those who have the political power in the National Assembly now, because of the coalition or contraction of politics, is that they should see beyond self-interest, that this country has a structural problem. Not even about more resources to Niger or South. No, it's actually about recreating the idea of a Nigerian state in which citizens see themselves as citizens. And my focus is what I call democratic citizenship. It's a state that allows people to have full rights, allow people to see themselves as members of that state, and have fairness, have equality, real legal equality, so that they can create for themselves outcome that satisfy their life. We don't want a state that's feudal or neo-feudal, where we are still keeping the legacies of aristocratic rules. We are running the state as if it's based on prerogative, prebendalism. We want a state that really can unleash the energy for the 21st century. And you cannot have that kind of state with the kind of conscience we have. But then your politics get in the way. It's not a matter of statesmanship. Can those who have the coalition that have the power in the National Assembly allow themselves to see the bigger picture, And is that these 4 levels, 1 is citizenship, 2 is economic rights, a sense of entitlement state where people know that this is what they can get. They can compel public office to respond to public need. 2 is a sense in which you have redemocratization, allow people at the lower level to what we call subsidiarity, to have the capacity to create wealth for themselves, manage those wealth, so they have incentive to invest in production rather than rent sharing. If you do these basic reforms, then you have a state that is fit for 21st century. But if we keep our power and use our power as a veto against the dynamism of change, then we're going to end with a resort to lawlessness, with people deliberately operating against the Constitution in the quest for sustainability or survival. And that's really dangerous. So my answer is either you have a national conference, a conversation that is robust, no host bear, and come out with something that's a sensible constitution without these too many provisions, or you default back to governance, and people probably will operate as if they are true federalism, operate as if they are confederate states, and that has implication for stability in the future.
Certainly, that's what I was going to ask you. What are the long-term effects of administrative reform if that was to be the option, which you said could be inevitable if we don't start a convocation now? What would the long-term effects be? And then to touch on secularism as well, and achieving that notion where we can wholesomely or wholly remove religion from the states and the way we govern and our practices, etc. Is that really practical? Is that something we can even really achieve, seeing how deep-rooted and embedded religion already is in our politics? Is that something that can be achieved with a constitutional review?
Yes, let's start with that second question. When I was a fellow at the CAR Center, I had a conversation with President Wahid, who was then Prime Minister of Indonesia, and who was a reputed Islamic cleric. And I argued, why didn't Indonesia have a Sharia? They said they didn't, because even though it was majorly up to 80 to 90% Islamic state, or Muslim country, or Muslim population, they refused because they didn't want to create that pluralism of legal framework. Now, it's easy to, this has nothing to do with undermine religion or not allow religious freedom. People are free to, but the point is that the state withdraws. The state withdraws because that's the right thing to do. It's a state that is plural. There are Christians, Muslims, unbelievers, atheists, all kinds of people. The state, therefore, should be careful about, in Nigeria, we follow the model of equality. Okay, Christian, Muslim, you balancing. It doesn't work, no balancing. Pull out. Allow people freely to go and worship and do that thing. So I think it's doable. What you need to do is to remove those provisions in the, and it's actually ironic that the Chief Justice of Nigeria made a call for even deepening the religious character of the Nigerian state. That's really ironic. It means that we don't understand the dynamics of liberal legality, which we subscribe by constitution, which is a constitution where what matters more is choice and equality, and not the notion of morality. The idea that people have a right and they have a choice, and therefore the state should be neutral, epistemically neutral. Don't promote any idea of the good. Allow people to choose the idea of good as long as you focus on stability, social, public morality, and not religion. So that failure to understand what concept you need to operate the way you want to operate is fatal, and that's the problem. So it's easy to pull back from that and restore back a state that has integrity. In public policy, we talk about state effectiveness. A state cannot be effective if it's a state that is captured by any ideological or special interest. A state has to be autonomous and neutral so that it has the capacity to enforce law evenly across everywhere, so that people will impose confidence in that state rather than people feeling that, oh, this state has been captured. It can be captured by Christians today, then under another regime, it captured by Muslims or captured by atheists. What a state that is not can be captured, because that state is neutral of all the conflicting moral, religious struggles on the background. That's one. Again, back to the issue around how the administrative system process will work, is that once you have entrepreneurial states, governors who are innovative and entrepreneurial, who are a little bit, if you like, reckless or radical, they'll push at the margin of constitutional validity. They do things that perhaps is constitutionally arguable, and then they go to court. Then the judges who are also statesmen will look at the pragmatism and interpret the constitution in a manner that allows those performance. So that's how the constitutional law moves away from the constitutional text. Professor Larry Tribe of Harvard Law School wrote a book called The Invisible Constitution. The idea is that the courts themselves create a different constitution for the constitutional text. So what will happen is that daring, innovative, entrepreneurial governors in states will push the envelope too far, and they go to court. And then statesman, radical, realist judges will give a stamp of approval. And so somehow we're able to get around the friction of our constitution, and then we unleash good governance. So we can do that, but it requires intelligence and capability.
Thank you very much, Sam Amadi.
Thank you.
I know it's a very big subject. We can spend the whole day on it, but thank you very much for your insights this morning.